The studio lights were already burning hot when the panel took their seats, giving the room that familiar tension that always hung in the air before a live broadcast. Jessica Tarlov arrived with the unshakable composure of someone who'd been winning televised debates for years. Like, before we move on, don't forget to hit subscribe button. Her royal blue blazer was perfectly pressed, her notes arranged in color-coded stacks that signaled preparation, expertise, and confidence. She had reviewed her talking points twice, rehearsed her transitions, and lined up a series of citations she was certain would set the tone. Education policy wasn't just familiar to her, it was a field she believed she dominated. Across the desk sat Karoline Leavitt, quiet, centered, and noticeably calm. She wore a simple crimson blazer, her hands lightly resting on a closed folder. Unlike Jessica, she wasn't reviewing notes or rehearsing under her breath. She simply watched the room, listened to the producers calling countdowns, and waited for the moment the discussion would begin. Jessica interpreted the stillness as inexperience. The host introduced the topic, and Jessica leapt in without hesitation. Her arguments flowed quickly, supported by studies from international education ministries, summaries from prestigious think tanks, and mention of an academic paper she claimed was essential to understanding equity models. She dismissed decentralized schooling as chaotic, labeled local control as ideologically vulnerable, and argued that national oversight was the only path to consistency. 3 minutes in, she had spoken almost uninterrupted. Karoline waited patiently for her turn. When the host finally invited her to respond, she offered a single, calm line. Parents are the experts of their own children. The simplicity of the statement made Jessica's posture stiffen. She recovered quickly and shot back with new intensity. She accused Karoline of pushing dangerous anti-intellectualism, insisted governing required credentials and institutions, and made it clear she viewed Karoline as someone punching above her weight. Her voice sharpened with each sentence. Whenever Karoline attempted to explain how top-down mandates strain rural communities, Jessica cut her off, sometimes with a scoff, sometimes with a condescending laugh. Finally, with a smirk that drew uncomfortable chuckles from around the table, she said, "Let's be honest, you're not exactly a policy expert. Maybe try taking an IQ test before offering national advice." The remark hit the studio like a sudden temperature drop. The host looked down. A panelist shifted awkwardly in his seat. Even the crew behind the glass paused. Karoline didn't bristle. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she offered a small, steady smile. "I already have," she said softly. Jessica blinked. Before anyone could ask what she meant, Karoline reached into the folder she had kept closed the entire segment. She pulled out a sealed envelope embellished with a blue and silver emblem. She opened it calmly and slid a document into the camera's view. The studio lights caught the lettering: Institute for Cognitive Evaluation, Federal Advisory Board. It wasn't a novelty test or an online quiz. It was an official cognitive assessment signed by Dr. Margaret Chen, the same Harvard professor Jessica had quoted earlier as an authority. Karoline read the results aloud with no theatrics. Analytical reasoning in the 97th percentile, verbal comprehension in the 99th, executive function in the 96th. The numbers landed with the precision of a quiet hammer. The entire set fell silent. One panelist leaned toward the document, eyes wide. The host's mouth hung open. Jessica's expression drained from superiority to disbelief, the color leaving her face as though the floor had shifted under her chair. Karoline looked at her directly and said, "I came prepared. Did you?" Her tone wasn't triumphant. It was steady, measured, a scalpel rather than a slap. The moment hung in the air, a sharp reversal neither the producers nor the audience had anticipated. Millions were watching, and the dynamic of the conversation had changed in an instant. A comment meant to belittle had detonated in the opposite direction, not because Karoline struck back loudly, but because she refused to be diminished. The camera zoomed in as the silence stretched, capturing the exact second arrogance evaporated into stunned quiet, and in that moment, the debate became something very different from what anyone expected. Not a clash of credentials, but a reminder that preparation and composure can dismantle condescension without a single raised voice. For several seconds, no one moved. The studio, normally alive with tiny sounds, paper shifting, producers whispering, cameras humming, felt vacuum sealed. Jessica stared at the document as if it might rearrange itself into something less humiliating. She opened her mouth once, closed it again, then reached for her notes as though an answer might be hiding under a sticky tab. Nothing came. The host finally tried to restart the discussion, but his voice cracked on the first syllable. Even he knew the moment couldn't be brushed aside like a misfired statistic. Karoline didn't press her advantage. She didn't raise an eyebrow or gloat. She simply placed the document back in the envelope and folded her hands as if nothing unusual had happened. That composure, so clean, so absolute, made the silence even heavier. One of the panelists, unable to stand it any longer, cleared his throat and tried to pivot back to policy, but every sentence he started drifted off halfway, derailed by the weight of what had just happened. Eventually he gave up, sinking back in his chair with the helpless expression of someone watching a train they can't stop. Jessica kept her eyes on the desk, blinking rapidly. It wasn't the test result alone that rattled her. It was the unmistakable fact that Karoline had anticipated the insult before it happened. The preparation, the calmness, the timing. It wasn't retaliation, it was strategy. The host, realizing the segment was collapsing, forced a nervous laugh and tried again to steer the conversation forward. Let's return to the core discussion, he said, his voice wobbling. Karoline nodded politely, ready to continue. Jessica didn't speak. The confidence that had carried her through countless panel battles had evaporated, leaving her posture slightly hunched, her hands suddenly unsure. Her pages, once a fortress, looked like clutter. When the host posed the next question, Karoline answered with the same steady clarity she'd shown from the start. She spoke about parental involvement, local flexibility, and the importance of respecting community differences. Now no one interrupted her. Every person on the set, including Jessica, listened with the kind of attention usually reserved for breaking news. The power dynamic had flipped so quietly, so decisively that even viewers at home would feel it instantly. Jessica attempted a response, but her voice didn't carry the same authority. She stumbled over a phrase she normally used with ease, misquoted a statistic, and finally fell silent. It was the first time anyone on that set could remember her retreating mid-argument. Karoline didn't exploit it. She simply picked up the thread and continued explaining her position with the same measured tone, as though the confrontation had never happened. But everyone knew the energy was different now. Eventually, the host wrapped up the segment early, clearly unsure how to salvage its rhythm. The camera light dimmed, the on-air sign clicked off, and the room exhaled all at once. Staff members exchanged looks, some stunned, some impressed, some almost amused by the sheer unexpectedness of what they'd witnessed. Jessica gathered her notes quickly, avoiding everyone's eyes. She muttered something about another meeting and moved toward the exit with a stiffness that made her steps uneven. Karoline rose slowly, slipping the envelope back into her folder with the same quiet grace she had shown throughout the debate. A producer approached her, wide-eyed, and whispered, "I've never seen her speechless." Not once. Karoline just smiled, not triumphantly, but thoughtfully, as if she understood the moment would echo far beyond the studio walls. And it would. Backstage, the air felt different, charged, unsettled, as though the debate had shaken something loose in the building itself. Assistants hustled around with clipboards, but their focus kept drifting toward Karoline as she walked down the hallway. Whispers followed her like ripples. Did you see that? She knew exactly what she was doing. Tarlov didn't stand a chance. Someone near the makeup room replayed the moment on a monitor, and a low chorus of stunned reactions rose each time Karoline revealed the document. Karoline didn't linger on any of it. She accepted a bottle of water from a staffer and thanked her softly, then kept moving toward the quiet corner of the green room reserved for guests. She placed her folder on the table, breathed out, and finally allowed the adrenaline to fade from her shoulders. She wasn't shaking. She had prepared too deeply for that, but she could feel the aftershock settling in her chest. She'd expected resistance, maybe hostility, but she hadn't expected the entire panel to freeze the way it did. Meanwhile, down the same hallway, Jessica had shut herself inside a dressing room. The door didn't latch completely, and through the narrow opening, her reflection in the makeup mirror looked nothing like her on-air persona. Her hands were braced on the tabletop, her shoulders tense, her jaw tight with a frustration she couldn't hide. She wasn't furious at Karoline, not entirely. She was furious at herself for giving her opponent the exact opening she needed, for underestimating her, for forgetting that preparation doesn't always look the same on everyone. A producer knocked gently. "Jessica, you okay?" A pause, then, "Fine." But her voice lacked its usual firmness, sounding like someone trying to rebuild a wall too quickly. The producer waited, then moved on when it became clear she wanted no conversation. Out in the main corridor, news alerts were already firing off. Clips from the debate hit social platforms within minutes, spreading with alarming speed. One headline read, "Panel stunned as Leavitt unveils federal cognitive evaluation." Another, "Tarlov's insult backfires in live debate showdown." Screens across the network lit up with real-time audience reactions reactions, many expressing shock, others admiration for the composure Karoline maintained. The clip of Jessica's insult followed by Karoline's calm reveal was looping non-stop. Even employees who hadn't watched the segment were gathering around desks, replaying the moment, rewinding, analyzing every frame. Word spread so quickly that by the time Karoline checked her phone, hundreds of notifications stacked on the lock screen. Messages from colleagues, friends, journalists, even rivals who couldn't resist acknowledging the spectacle. She didn't open any of them. She just set the phone face down and closed her eyes for a moment, grounding herself. She hadn't come to embarrass anyone. She'd come prepared for an attack she suspected might come, and Jessica had walked right into it. The green room door creaked and a young production assistant stepped in, looking hesitant. "Karoline, they want you back in the control room for a moment." "Is something wrong?" Karoline asked. "Not wrong," the assistant said, shaking her head. "Just unusual." Karoline followed her through the maze of hallways until they reached the control room, alive with monitors and headsets and producers darting from station to station. The executive producer stepped forward, rubbing his forehead like he'd been processing chaos for 20 minutes straight. "Karoline," he said, "the clip is exploding. We've never seen engagement spike this fast on a daytime segment. The network wants to run a follow-up, maybe even bring you back tonight." Karoline blinked, the offer landing heavier than she expected. She'd come for one debate, not a full media cycle. "Is that necessary?" she asked carefully. "Necessary? No," the producer said, "but there's demand. People want your perspective. They want to hear how you managed to stay that composed. This is becoming a national conversation." Behind him, one of the editors replayed the moment again on a loop, shaking his head in disbelief each time Jessica's face fell. The producer lowered his voice. "Whatever you decide, just know, you changed the whole trajectory of this day." Karoline didn't answer right away. She looked through the glass window into the studio she had just walked out of, now dark, empty, harmless. She thought about the insult, the silence, the reversal, and the way unexpected moments reveal more truth than rehearsed speeches ever could. Then she turned back to the producer with a calm that by now everyone recognized. "I'll think about it," she said, and the room went quiet, waiting for her next move. Outside the control room, the hallway buzzed with the kind of restless energy that only erupts after something unpredictable goes viral. Staff members kept stealing glances at Karoline as she walked by, not with the curiosity normally reserved for guests, but with something closer to respect, mixed with disbelief. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't boasted, and yet she'd shifted the ground beneath a national commentator without raising her voice once. Meanwhile, Jessica finally stepped out of her dressing room, her expression carefully rebuilt, though the strain around her eyes hadn't faded. She walked briskly, avoiding eye contact, but whispers still trailed behind her. Some were sympathetic, some judgmental, some simply astonished. She felt every one of them. The humiliation wasn't just public, it was internal, tightening in her chest with every step. She had survived harsh interviews, heated exchanges, even personal attacks. But this was different. She had underestimated someone and been caught unprepared on the biggest stage she knew. She spotted Karoline at the end of the hall, talking quietly with a producer. Their eyes met for half a second. Jessica expected gloating, even a smirk. Instead, Karoline offered a polite nod, a gesture of acknowledgement, not triumph. For a moment, that almost made it worse. Jessica turned away quickly, her heels clicking sharply as she made for the exit. She didn't want sympathy, she didn't want explanations. She needed distance, away from the monitors replaying the moment, away from the staff who had watched her falter, away from the feeling that the ground she once owned had shifted beneath her. In the green room, Karoline gathered her things slowly. The envelope lay on the table, its seal still unbroken where she had opened it minutes earlier. She traced a finger absently along the embossed emblem, not out of pride, but out of reflection. She had known something like this might happen. She hadn't wanted it, she certainly hadn't planned for it to turn into a national spectacle, but she had prepared for the possibility, because experience had taught her that underestimation wasn't a rare occurrence. It was a pattern, and today she had decided not to let the pattern stand. Her phone vibrated again, calls from unknown numbers, notifications multiplying faster than she could swipe them away. She finally picked up one message from a close colleague. It read simply, "You handled that with grace. Proud of you." She allowed herself a small smile before placing the phone away. A senior producer knocked lightly on the doorframe. "Karoline, you're free to go unless you want to stay for tonight's meeting. The executives are still talking about options." She looked up. "Thank you. I think I'll step out for some air. Just a heads up," he added with a half-amused breath. There's a group of reporters outside already. Word traveled fast. Karoline nodded. Of course there were. Nothing quiet ever survived the internet for more than a few minutes. She slipped the envelope back into her folder, adjusted her blazer, and headed toward the exit. The moment she stepped outside, a burst of camera shutters popped like fireworks. Reporters crowded forward, microphones extended, voices overlapping. Karoline, did you plan this? What was going through your mind? Is it true the evaluation was signed by the same Professor Tarlov quoted? Did you anticipate the insult? Were you trying to humiliate her? Karoline kept walking with steady steps, offering no theatrics, no smugness. I'm not here to embarrass anyone, she said firmly. I came to debate policy. I responded to a personal remark with facts, nothing more. Her calmness didn't silence the crowd, it energized them. Cameras followed her all the way to the black sedan waiting near the curb. A handler opened the door, but before she stepped inside, a final question cut through the chaos. Karoline, what do you think this moment means for you politically? She paused, one hand on the door, and looked out at the dozens of lenses pointed her way. The city noise thinned for a split second, replaced by anticipation. It means, she said softly but clearly, that people are tired of arrogance being mistaken for intelligence, and tired of politeness being mistaken for weakness. She stepped into the car, the door closed behind her, and the vehicle pulled away as the crowd scattered, to upload clips and quotes before anyone else could. Inside the car, the city blurred past the window. Karoline exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the day settle into something deeper. Not stress, not victory, but a turning point she couldn't yet define. She didn't know where it would lead. She only knew one thing with certainty. The moment wasn't over. It was only beginning. If you like this video, then subscribe.